So at this point, our UI test is working perfectly fine. But now the question is, can we improve it? One of the patterns that you can use when you're performing UI test is known as the page object model. And sometimes people will refer to it as robot pattern also, but I've always called it page object model. And basically the whole idea of the page object model for UI testing is you create a page object, a class, which wraps all the complexities of finding, tapping elements and interacting with the elements itself. Over here in this example, you can see that the author has created a class called login page. And the login page class consists of all the functions that you're going to be doing for the login page itself, like entering the username, entering the password, tapping on the login button. This means that when you actually use it in your actual test, your test becomes much nicer. So we are going to be utilizing this effort and we'll be creating our own APR screen page or APR screen itself so we can use it in our application. So let's go back to our application, and you can see in the UI test, I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder and I will call it page objects. Okay, and in the page objects, now I can create some sort of a page object. So we only have one page and that represents the APR request screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that. So I'm going to say new file from template. And I can say APR request. Either you can say page or you can even say screen. Both are perfectly fine. This is completely up to you. And that's the only screen we have, like the APR request screen. Okay, once we have the API request screen, the first thing we're going to do is import XC test so that we have access to the XCUI application and all the other things. Next, we can go ahead and create API request screen as a class. It will have a dependency on XCUI application. And we need that, and the reason that we need that, we don't really need this part. The reason that we need this is that so that inside the API request screen, we should be able to access different, different arguments. Now, once you create the API request screen and we have access to the app itself, we can set a couple of different things over here. We can say self.app equals to, or launch arguments, UI test, and app self.app.launch. So we can even launch the app itself. Now inside API request screen, this is where we're going to be accessing different elements. Now there are different elements like social security number text field, you have the calculate APR button, and there are, of course, different ways of accessing those things. Now, what I usually do is I just create a private lazy var SSN text field. Private because I don't really want other people to be accessing the text field object itself, but if they want the properties of the text field, like maybe the value or something, then we can expose those things individually. This is going to return us XCUI element. Now this is a lazy property. This means that this is only going to be initialized once. And over here, I can go ahead and ask for the text field, app.textfields, SSN, text field itself, and I will simply return the text field itself. Perfect. Now this is a private property. So in order to access this text field, if you want to put something in the text field, what we will have to do is we will have to create a function like enter SSN. And this function will be based on whatever UI you are implementing. All right. So if you are implementing a UI where you will enter the username and password, then you can call this enter username or enter password. Over here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to simply tap on the SSN text field and then SSN text field dot type text, and we can simply type the text that you're providing. All right. So that's our first implementation. Obviously, this is not really complete. And what I can do is I can go ahead and start using it. So I'll go back to my Ulu R1 UI test. And in these tests, I can start using my screen itself. And we'll remove the code as we go along. So for screen APR request screen, once we go inside the setup function, this is where I can go ahead and initialize it, API request screen, passing in the app itself. This is going to launch automatically, so we don't really have to do anything. And now we can actually start converting these things. Okay. So we'll say screen dot enter SSN and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's the SSN that we're entering. See how simple it becomes. I mean, we have already eliminated this line, and this line. All right. Now the next thing is to calculate APR button. Now, in our APR request screen, we don't really have any way to tap on the button, but that's for us to implement. So we can always go back and we can try to create the same lazy property, private lazy var calculate APR button, which is again XC UI element. And we're going to get the button. We'll call it calculate APR button app.buttons calculate APR button, and then we'll simply go ahead and return it. Now, if I want to tap, then I can say tap calculate APR button, and then we can simply say calculate APR button dot tap. There we go. All right. Now we can go back to our test, and this is where we were getting the actual button, right? So now I can say screen dot tap something. Now you can also, you can also make it more fluent if you want. You can say enter SSN dot, and then you can say over here calculate button. That is also possible. But if you want something like more fluent, like the one on line number 28, you have to go back and you have to make sure that when you enter SSN, it just returns you self itself. All right. And you can do that for most of these functions so that you can use it in a more fluent scenario. So now I can go back. Oops, let's see what's going on over here. Probably we'll have to make sure that we are returning something over here. So because we have simply doing the tap part, so I can go ahead and return like self over here, or I can go ahead and return self. So if we're just returning the same exact object, which is the APR request screen. So we're just returning the same object again. Now I can comment out line number 37. Now this does return something, right? And that's something we are not really using. So there are a couple of, you can do discarded result. I mean, that is something that you can do. Like if I go over here, I can put something over here which can say discarded result, which means that if you discard the result, it's okay. All right. I mean, if you want, you can also like not do that. But again, it really depends on the UI. In our case, once you when you tap on the calculate APR button, there's not really any other button that you need to press. So you can even remove this. You don't have to return self over here if you want to. So you don't have to do that. All right, let's go ahead and build it. Okay, so now that warning is gone, but now it's a little bit more fluent, right? Enter social security number, tap the calculate APR button. After that, we will have to make sure that our APR text is actually matching. All right. So how can we do that? Because we want to make sure that the APR text is populating with something, this means that we will have to go back over here and create another property, just like the social security number text field, just like the calculate APR. So instead of doing it multiple times, I'm just going to paste it over here because it looks exactly like that. See that? Now we're getting access to the APR text. I can go back over here in my code. So you can see that we're doing over here APR text. So if we want to access APR text, we actually want to access, first of all, we need to find out if it exists. And then we want to access the actual text inside the APR text, which is also known as a label. So in our APR request screen, we can create some other properties also, or functions if you want. We can say APR text exist, and we can even give it some sort of a timeout, or which is a time interval. Default it to be 5 seconds because that is what we were using anyways. And we can simply say APR text dot wait for existence for that particular timeout. So this is going to allow us to simply check if the APR exists or not. Let's go back to the test. We can comment this out. We can comment this out because now we have some helper functions to help us out with that. Assert true. And over here we can say screen dot APR text exists. So it becomes a little bit simpler. For not equal to empty, we need to access the label. Again, we'll go back to the APR text. And right over here, we can create a function, get APR text, string, APR text.label. So we're only returning the things that it needs. Instead of returning the whole APR text, which is a XCUI element, we're only returning the label, the text that it needs. And that will help us to compare it much easier. Screen dot, get APR text. Okay, so you can see that now we have reduced our test to only a couple of lines. And I think it's a little bit easier to read also. All right, let me go ahead and run this test. And then we can do the same thing for the next test over there. So let me go ahead and run it. So right now, okay, so it looks like it's fine, looks like it's running, but let me go ahead and run it again just to make sure that everything is okay. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to run, which is kind of weird. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, so now probably it's trying to run it, but it's taking too much time to run, as you can see. All right, so once it's running, we can hopefully come back to it. Okay, there we go. And this should return you, okay, there we go. Again, it's launching. Entering something, and we get some APR. Oh, great. Test is passing. Perfect. All right. We can do the same exact thing for the next test, which is display the error message part of it. We'll say screen dot enter SSN. The only thing that is changing over here is the actual SSN. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're entering an SSN, which is wrong, and it probably doesn't exist. And now you can see that all the effort that you have made previously is coming into play, right? So we can remove all of these different lines. Right? Looks nice, right? Much nicer, much cleaner. But now we have a different static text, which is the message text. And we can kind of like do the same thing for the message text, just like we were doing for the APR text. So I can just copy this and rename this to message text exists. And this will be message text. Again, the message text, you will have to create another property to get that access. Message text over here, and over here. And so now its message text exists. So now we can go back to our test and probably remove these lines because we don't need it. And we can say screen.messageText exist. Perfect. And the last one over here is the actual label. So this we can also do very similar to the APR text. I can say get message text dot label. Great. So now we have the message text dot label, and I can go back over here and use that. Screen dot message get message text. And now I can try to run both the tests. So let's run it again. So this is known as the page object pattern. And again, some people are calling it robot pattern, but I have used it probably like 15 years ago or so. And at that time, we were calling it like page object model or page object pattern. Very, very common pattern to use for UI testing. All right. Yeah, I'm not really sure why it's acting a little weird, the UI testing itself. Oh, that might be because we didn't really remove these lines. See that? Okay, so maybe that's why it's actually launching it multiple times. So we don't really have to do that. All right, so XC application, I guess we can pass in the XC application over here. App equals to XC UI application, that is fine. And then we are simply passing it. Okay, let's go ahead and run it again. Maybe that was the issue, that we were probably launching it multiple times. Okay, so now it looks like it's behaving much better. And there we go, let's run it again. Entering Social Security. Great. So now that was the problem. So we were launching it multiple times. So there you have it. This is called the page object pattern, and it is very common to use this in UI application because it makes your application much simpler. Now this part over here, I call these the actions. So if you have a much longer form where you're registering a user, so you might say enter first name, enter last name, enter email, enter password, enter street address, and you can see, right, it's a lot of information. So this will become much nicer the longer the form is, because it will read much nicer, it will be much more condensed. So hope you enjoyed this page object pattern. Thank you.